After the end of First World War, America was at its all-time high. Economy was prospering, more and more people were moving out of their small towns into the rapidly growing and booming cities. Technologies were changing the most fundamental aspects of American society, and there was a hopeful and cheerful feeling for the future in the air. However, it all went crumbling down when in one moment all of the hopes for tomorrow disappeared like a morning mist, and instead people were met with the harsh and unforgiving reality of the greatest economic crash in history. That's where Mafia 1 starts, and it tells a tale of loyalty, betrayal, family, business, devotion and sacrifice. It is a very solid gangster story. It shows us how tempting a gangster life can be, how violent an illegal business venture can become, and ultimately how many things you would need to sacrifice for such a life. But what is fascinating about the story of Tommy Angelo, the main hero of this game, is that every decision that he made along his path of death and desolation makes perfect sense. I can't look at Tommy and tell you when he crossed that line which separates us, normal, law-abiding citizens, from the stone-cold gangsters who kill people with no remorse and go home like nothing even happened afterwards. Because by the end of his story, Tom kills whoever the dawn points at and blows up innocent people with explosives. But if we go back to the very start of his descent into the world of madness, then we would see a normal citizen who just tries to earn an honest living, very much like you and me do. There was no desire to harm others, hunger for power or riches, just another normal person who parked at a wrong place and time. And if we were in his shoes, we'd probably do the same thing he did. If two well-dressed gentlemen put a gun to your temple and order you to drive, there is not much incentive for you to not do exactly what they tell you to do. And if you are beaten in the middle of the street by some local punks a few days later, it is also not that unnatural to go for protection to the same people who can afford expensive suits and threatening people under the open night sky, because those people clearly have power. And not only the power to protect, but also to teach those arrogant punks a lesson for messing with normal hardworking people like ourselves. And you can say that after making it even with the street thugs, Tommy could just go and never return to the world of Mafia. But even here I would disagree. I started this video talking about the American setting of the 1930s, not just to sound cool and profound. I mean, it wasn't the only reason I did that. You see, even in the best of times, the career of a taxi driver is not something we'd call a promising and fulfilling life path. The pay is minuscule, work hours are long, your clients are assholes, and there is not much hope that it'll get better in the future.
The only tip I'll give you is to stop smoking in your vehicle. Felt like I was sitting in an ashtray.
Sure, whatever you say.
But now add the horrors and desperation of the Great Depression, and we get a pretty harsh reality where every day feels more like an agony than life. Prohibition laws created demand for what people couldn't find on the legal side of business. But the gangs which emerged as a result of that gave people who had absolutely no future prospects a chance to gain back control over their own lives. For Tommy, working for a gang like Salieri's was the only way out of poverty, otherwise he'd be stuck in a black and yellow taxi cab for the rest of his life. Mob life presented an alternative to that. So I think we can all agree that for anyone in Tommy's shoes, passing on such an opportunity would be simply unacceptable. But you can still say that you know what you are signing up for when you start to work for the Mafia. You sign up for killing and tormenting innocent people who just try to survive like you did not so long ago. However, organized crime has a way to lure people deep inside their tenacious webs, and only when it's too late to escape its tight grip, you finally realize how deep you've gone. Because Tommy didn't start with executing people left and right. His initial jobs were small, even innocent. Give a ride to your colleagues while those collect money, or borrow some race car to give your team a slight advantage in a race, or even be the driver in that same race. Those tasks are of course not entirely legal, but if compared to what other crime families were doing, Tom's family was clearly a lesser evil. They didn't beat people to death in the broad daylight, didn't start shooting just to scare off their business competition, and if they wanted to meddle with the racing results, they disabled a car and not its driver.
Mikey Dunn, our driver? Some of Morello's guys roughed him up pretty good last night. Broke his arm, broke his jaw, sent him to the hospital. Jesus.
There was violence in Tom's job, yes, but when compared to the violence which already existed in the world around, it felt like a drop in the ocean. And of course, on top of that, there was a clear sense of belonging and purpose. Everything that Tom did was to protect his people. He was surrounded by those who opened their arms and gave him everything when he had nothing. He felt like the mob not only used him for their dirty job, but rather that they all were in here together like a family. And a real family would never leave you behind. That's how the criminal world sucks you in. First it gives you small, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, tasks that aim to show how lucky and fortunate you are to be a part of something greater than you. Then it manipulates you with fancy cars, big paychecks, and the feeling of true camaraderie. And when you get hooked on the promises of royalty and family, it asks you to do something terrific. Something that you would never even consider doing when you just joined. But at that point it's too late to run away. Your hands are already dirty, and the blind devotion which was meticulously cultivated in your brain wouldn't let you step away. And only then the gangster world will slowly, bit by bit, show you its true colors. You're not better than the other families. You are just as rotten, if not more. Royalty, principles, friendships, all those things are empty promises, and you are only important if you do exactly what you are told and never ask any questions. In a way, Thomas never stopped being a taxi driver. His suit became much more expensive, the car which he drove now had more horsepower under its bumper, and the clients weren't half-conscious drunkards anymore.
Oh boy, you look like shit.
But just like before, he stayed an insignificant cog in the system, which will be replaced the moment it couldn't do what it's supposed to. But the biggest mistake Thomas did is to actually believe that he was something more than that. He thought that what he does has a purpose. He wished to protect the neighborhood from the outsiders, tried to stop a war which destroyed the city from inside, and just wanted to make Lost Heaven safer for those he considered to be close to him. Every single step on his path made perfect sense. But the moment he stopped and looked at the trail that he left behind him, he saw that it was filled with mutilated corpses, destroyed fates, and a mountain made of human suffering. And when the veil of lies finally disappeared, Tom found himself with a gun, pointing at a person he never met in his life, and whom he'll kill just because such were his orders. At which point of his path, Tommy became such a monster. Maybe he was always like that deep inside. Or perhaps along this road of destruction and chaos, he lost himself in a web of lies that he was tricked to believe in. He never aimed to become like this. He believed that he fights for something bigger, for his family, for a better tomorrow, for a life that he could be proud of at his final moments. But at the end of the day, he fought for someone else's interests. Everything he did only created more chaos and suffering in the world. And Tommy wasn't a bad person at the start. He was perfectly normal, just like you and just like me. However, when we make decisions, we don't know where those decisions will lead us. Maybe at the end of the path we've chosen, all our dreams will come true, or perhaps we will turn into our most hated nightmares. And there is no way to know which one we would be until it's too late to change anything. Because every step of his journey, Tommy was convinced that he pulled a lucky card in his life. A card which gave him true friends, love of his life, and a purpose to live for. But a lucky card one day turned into a grim reaper the very next.